All right, everybody, thank you very much. Welcome back to SAP Day 7. It's the beginning of our PM session. Earlier, you received the schedule, so you know we have Ariel Weaver, and her information is there for you to see. And then afterwards, we have Dimitrios Orakis. He's going to interview two geospatial veterans, and their information is there as well. So with no further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into Ms. Weaver's presentation. Now, she is not able to be with us today, so she has pre-recorded her presentation. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to put those in the chat or wait until the end and then unmute yourself and we can discuss it. So here we go.
Hi, my name is Ariel Weaver. I am a former Fulbright scholar and researcher to Namibia, a country in southern Africa. While I was in Namibia, I worked on various projects, two of which I will discuss today that involved remote sensing. I'm a former graduate student from the University of Louisville. I spent my graduate career working on remote sensing for social ecological systems and conservation. In 2017, I received a Fulbright grant to research in Namibia. During this time, I was a part of two different projects that related to using geospatial technology in the field, and I will share a little bit about each of these projects today during this talk. But first, I will give a brief introduction to the basics of remote sensing. Remote sensing is an art and science that uses devices and sensors to capture information about an object, area, or phenomenon from a distance. This could be from satellites, sensors that are equipped to airplanes, unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones. This diagram depicts the sun radiating solar energy to different land cover types, and then this energy either being absorbed or transmitted to the satellite. This allows us to differentiate different types of land cover classes using satellite imagery. Visible light, the light we see with our eyes alone, is a small part of the whole spectrum of radiant energy in the universe. The entire range of electromagnetic waves is known as the electromagnetic spectrum. This includes electromagnetic energy ranging from gamma rays to radio waves. Satellite imagery.
All right, so apparently not all folks can hear it. If you were hearing it, I think that was actually coming through my mic. So something is certainly the matter. Can hear fine now. Okay, maybe there's no problem. Boy, I've messed this thing up, haven't I?
Magnetic waves is known as the electromagnetic spectrum. This includes electromagnetic energy ranging from gamma rays to radio waves. Satellite imagery is composed of pixels or cells that are the reflection of the reflectance or proportional to the reflectance in some subset or band of the electromagnetic spectrum. For any given material, the amount of radiation that is reflected, absorbed, or transmitted will vary along wavelength. This important property of matter allows for the possibility that different substances or classes can be identified and separated by their spectral signatures as shown in this figure. The first project that I'm going to talk about is the Cassava project. This project aims to examine the linkages and impacts of climate on how vulnerable and or able to adapt communities are with how the land functions as a result of climate change. This region is characterized as extremely dependent on small-scale agriculture, rain-fed agriculture, and struggles with food security issues, and is highly dependent on natural resources. The Cassava project was an intensive 6 weeks of field work for me. I spent nearly every night of those 6 weeks camping, getting up early, conducting surveys, and collecting data using drones with the rest of our teams. The project was split into 2 parts: a social survey translated into local languages, Salozi in Setswana, and English. This survey included questions that covered a range of topics, including demographics, education, agricultural activities, natural resource activities, and information about the food security as well. The second portion of the project focuses on measuring the shifts in climate and vegetation due to the extreme variability, particularly vulnerable to large shifts in vegetation based on rainfall. The study area is comprised of the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, or CAZA. This spans over 5 countries: Angola, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. It covers nearly 440,000 square kilometers of land and is the largest land-based conservation area in the world, with rich biodiversity. For the purposes of this study, we surveyed 3 different communities that monitor and manage their own wildlife, or conservancies. As you can see in this map, mean annual precipitation, or MAP, follows a north-south gradient of rainfall in this semi-arid savanna grassland and woodland ecosystem. And you can see the different regions where these conservancies are: the Lower West GMA in Zambia, Mashi Conservancy in Namibia, and the Chobe Enclave in Botswana. In each of these communities, we visited 48 households per 5 village areas in each of the 3 conservancies, for a total of 726 household surveys. For the biophysical component, we used a drone to fly nearly 60 flights to capture data. The flight plan was 100-meter altitude, and we were taking about 200 square meters of extent of imagery. In this photo, you can see the drone that we used, of DJI Mavic Pro. It is equipped with a Parrot Sequoia sensor. We had to 3D print the coupling that attached the sensor to the drone, but it worked very well. And the Mavic was used because it's very lightweight and easy to travel with, as opposed to some of the other drones that are out on the market. And the Parrot Sequoia sensor is one that's meant for looking at vegetation. It has green, red edge, and near infrared bands, and this helps to capture the information that is related to vegetation health. We also conducted a field survey at 60 plots, and at each of these sites where we flew the drone, we walked in transects. So at a random angle, we walked in either direction 50 meters. At 10-meter intervals, we searched a radius of 5 meters for vegetation and counted trees. We recorded the height of these trees and the estimated crown size. We used a Garmin R1 GNSS and a Leica Disto 810 rangefinder in order to accurately assess our location and the heights of the tree canopy. This image is a parrot from the parrot sequoia. It's an orthomosaic, or a composite of multiple images in order to create this larger scale image of the site that we flew, this site that we flew the drone at. And here you can also see the spectral signatures of healthy plants, stress plants, and soil along the electromagnetic spectrum at the bands that it was calculated. For more information on the Cassava project, you can go to cassava.weebly.com. Our project is still ongoing, but there's a number of publications and information about our project available online at that website. The second part of my talk, I want to talk about delineating the human footprint in the Zambezi region of Namibia. First of all, I guess we have to talk about what is the human footprint. The human footprint is comprised of the land use in any given area, meaning all areas where human activities impact the landscape. The Zambezi region is primarily rural. The human population is growing rapidly alongside rich wildlife populations. People in this region are primarily farmers that rely on rain-fed agriculture, such as corn, millet, and sorghum. A major issue in this region is human-wildlife conflict. Elephants may raid crops, or a spooked lion might injure or cause death. Understanding where people are living and working in the area is important to target mitigation efforts in order to reduce human-wildlife conflict. Being able to identify the human footprint in this region is critical for many reasons. Like I said previously, mitigating human-wildlife conflict is extremely important. However, it is also important to maintain wildlife corridors for biodiversity and supporting local communities through ecotourism, another major source of income in this region. Growing populations of people are increasing the demand for land for both housing and agriculture. Knowing the extent of land used for settlements and agriculture is important for planning and future development that is in line with conservation goals. Here you can see an elephant crossing the border at Ngoma border post between Namibia and Botswana. While animals like this don't always cross the border at official sites, this image shows how wildlife are present even in built areas. This slide has photos I took in the region of wildlife that I encountered. All of these animals and so many more can be found in this region, and they are the reason this is one of the most diverse wildlife conservation areas in the world. Remote sensing in this region is kind of difficult due to overlapping spectral characteristics across different land cover, land use types, and also heterogeneous mixtures of trees, grasses, and shrubs can be difficult to separate as well. Building materials are also more traditionally natural resources. Settlement areas are often bare, sandy clay loam soils, which are similar to bare areas that occur naturally, particularly in the floodplains. Here you have some images of lapas, which are the traditional homes in the Zambezi region. They may consist of several buildings inside of a reed fence, and the homes are made of grasses for thatching, thatched roofs, and the mud clay mixture for the for the sides of the houses, and in addition to using timber for the timber poles for the structural integrity of the building. So a lot of these have natural signatures that are similar to other land cover types. Here is a map of the study region. You have about 10,000 square kilometers of area in the Zambezi region, which is the study area is outlined in red. You can see also prominently displayed is the State Forest Reserve, where people don't generally live. In light blue, you see the conservancies or community organizations that manage wildlife populations in their areas. And then you have the national parks, which are managed separately. And as you can see, this region of Namibia is surrounded by and borders Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. And globally, habitat loss is one of the greatest drivers of biodiversity loss globally. Growing populations are putting more pressure on the land for homes, businesses, and agriculture for a growing human footprint of the landscape. The Zambezi region's population is growing quickly. Strategic planning is necessary to both accommodate needs for the population, but also to maintain migration corridors and quality habitat for wildlife. And here you can see the Zambezi region in the context of the larger Kaza region, as we saw before in the Kazava project's extent. But this map shows more of the different land management styles or land management schemes that are prominent in the region, such as national parks, game nature reserves, conservancies, which are communal areas that are managed, and then protected forests, hunting reserves, safari areas, and animal sanctuaries, and then other designations. So my first research question is, what is the extent of the human footprint in the Zambezi region? The second research question is, what is the best remote sensing technique to identify the human footprint area for the Zambezi region? For this, I used 4 Landsat tiles. They were mosaicked and then clipped to the study region. You can also see the surrounding national parks in this image. This is the image that I used for the analyses that I will discuss in a moment. So the first approach that I want to talk about is object-based image analysis. This uses size, shape, hue, texture, GIS shapefiles, and digital elevation models for object recognition and classification. They can be more accurate than conventional pixel-based classifications in savannas. This method segments the image into distinct regions of pixels that then can be used to classify the pixel groups into different land cover types. The second method I want to talk about is random forest. Random forest was created by Bryman in 2000. It's an algorithm developed to classify images through a creation of an ensemble of decision trees. So a data set would be put into the algorithm, which would be classified according to these decision trees. Each node is split at a different place, and then the averages of these trees, the results of these trees, vote for which land cover type each pixel or segment would be put into. You can use either a pixel based method or an object based method as well with this algorithm. It's also important to mention that it partitions data into a set of training data set and an out of bag accuracy assessment. So the three methods that I'll be testing are object-based image analysis approach, a random forest approach, and then a hybrid approach where you put the segmented image into the random forest model. So to train the data for verification purposes and training data purposes, I visited 137 sites in the field and created sampling locations using a 500-meter buffer of roads, just so that it would be possible for me to visit those sites. I supplemented with another 150 points using Google Earth in areas that I knew, so I could identify the different land cover types using Google Earth and finer scale imagery. And then I use a region growing algorithm in the object-based image analysis software in order to sample locations for the random forest analysis. This was 9 by 9 pixels at a 270-meter buffer around training points. And then 30% of the region grown data were kept aside to use for validation purposes in the random forest models. So for a more visual interpretation of the workflow, I used pre-processed, flash calibrated, mosaicked Landsat image and some derived imagery as well, and added that added those together, layer stacked them, and then put them through each of these three methods: the OBIA, the random forest, and the random forest OBIA hybrid approach. And then I performed accuracy assessments and interpreted the results. So here are the different results from each of the methods that were used. The A is object-based image analysis approach. It had an 80% accuracy assessment. B was the hybrid approach, and it had a 76% accuracy assessment. And random forest was the least accurate of the group with 71%. I think each of these is overestimating either agriculture or built settlement areas. However, the object-based image analysis approach does seem to perform better according to the accuracy assessment that I performed. However, there are still some issues, I think, with overestimating along the rivers and in the floodplains on the amount of settlement areas and agriculture in the region, particularly in the random forest. But you can see the overestimation in all three versions. So some of the conclusions I came up with from this work was that object-based image analysis approach worked best. It's still difficult to disentangle different land cover types across the different methodologies that I use to classify the imagery. Object-based image analysis methods were much more time-consuming to fine-tune. The human footprint in Zambezi region growing is in the Zambezi region is growing, and further analysis should look into how these growth patterns are affecting wildlife migration. And this data is useful for determining areas to prioritize mitigation efforts for human wildlife conflict. Thank you very much for paying attention, and I hope that you learned some things and got a little bit excited about different ways that you can use remote sensing in your work in the future. Thank you.
All right, any questions? Any questions? I really like that presentation. She really went through most of the projects that we do kind of follow that same linear approach. And as I mentioned before, the methods tend to stay the same for a while, depending on the problem that you're working on. So think about artificial intelligence systems that do facial recognition. The very first step is you have to map out the topographic features of the face. And that object-based image analysis that she was talking about, that's all it does is it can look at any feature, whether it's on the surface or a face or a cell or whatever. But like pixels form features. So, I mean, you could almost take a pencil and just draw the circle around the features in your face. It's very easy to see. It's very easy to see for the computer. And once you label it, the software, the model knows what these features are. So when it encounters the next face, it knows eyebrow, it knows nose, it knows whatever you've informed it. It knows savanna land, it knows asphalt land cover, right? So I hope that you're seeing that. And then further, her format of her presentation was very much the scientific format. So that's kind of the standard for when we do projects and we document them. There's always the expectation that you're going to go and deliver that somewhere. And that's how it goes. So it lays out very clearly the background and the objectives and the whole point of doing the project and all, and then a summary at the end. So in years past of SAP, for all the projects that were completed, they all terminated in just such a presentation. Now, of course, that's a lot easier when we live together on campus for 3 weeks straight. We have a lot more time, and expectations are a lot higher for that as well. But if you choose to take this project serious, that's where it'll be headed. Once you develop your skills and then you choose a problem, I mean that's the format to put it in, and that's what research at the university looks like. So that's always what we'll be striving for. So anybody, feel free to unmute and ask any questions. We are going to move into the next part.
Good morning, everyone.
Not that quick. That's Dimitrios Zourakis. As I mentioned before, he is a legend in the geospatial. He has tons of experience, and he's been in and around Kentucky doing this geospatial stuff for considerable time. And hopefully I won't have so much trouble this time trying to share my screen, because last time I lost all the controls. Let's see, let me just stop sharing real quick and then try again. I think I just wasn't in full screen mode. And then here, we don't need everybody's face. All right, so I hope this works out, and if anybody has any trouble hearing it at all, just let me know.
Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the geospatial segment of the summer apprenticeship program at Kentucky State University. My name is Dimitrios Zorakis, and I have for you today 2 interviews with a couple of people who are prominent in the sector of K-12 education in geospatial. And the first person is Scott Dobler. He's the co-coordinator at the Kentucky Geographic Alliance. And the second interviewee is Charlie Fitzpatrick. He's K-12 education manager with ESRI. So I hope you enjoy those interviews, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for asking me to participate in this opportunity to talk more about the Kentucky Geographic Alliance and geographic information systems specifically. So the KGA, or the Kentucky Geographic Alliance, is an advocate for geographic education, and we provide training in Kentucky. Now that has a wide variety of training, from grouping K-12 teachers together to talk about education, to professionals like engineers, all the way across the spectrum to like grocery store managers. Now we understand that engineers would use geographic information systems to locate and measure things that they put out in the landscape, but also grocery store managers will sit down and plan where's the best items to place in which aisle so people can find things more readily. Okay, we also have people in the public that use geographic information systems to talk about where they live and what they want to do. Now, this all deals with skill development, data per se, okay? So within data, it really helps you understand our just absolutely wonderful natural or human environment, sometimes both of them together, our natural and human environment. Let me give you an example of this. Bing daily has some absolutely stunning photographs. This happens to be a photograph of Costa Brava in Spain. And as I look at this photograph, the first thing that I see is the castle, a defensible area, because of this island that's surrounded by the water in 3/4 of the island. Or how shall I say, the island is surrounded by 3/4 of the ocean, so it's really good natural defense system, and the community will develop. So the question is, one of the questions I have for you is, why did your community develop the way it did? Well, Frankfurt was because of a ford that goes over the Kentucky River. In Louisville, it happened to be a natural point where we had the falls, where people had to get out of their boats to walk around the falls and then reload their boats and keep on going. In Bowling Green, we live in a natural fall area where the Barron River changes from a higher level to a lower level, and it created a natural trading place. Trying to get students to change the way they think about their natural and human world. And that's basically what I wanted to tell you all about that.
How can we connect with, have the connection made within schools and the Kentucky Geographic Alliance?
Well, with the Kentucky Geographic Alliance, there's a series of websites, and I have the website put together for you right here, kgaalliance.org. And what it does is it takes you out, let me flip out to the website. And I believe, I'm clicking around quite a bit of time here. But here's the website, kgaalliance.org. And you can scroll through here and look at a lot of different things that we have available for students and teachers. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you all about is the teacher resources. And this is how you can go out and get newsletters and activities in GIS and put together some excellent software that you can use in your classroom. But students can also come in here and explore a number of things, like, for instance, our story map gallery. And the story maps are just basically taking maps and telling us stories about our wonderful world, like the natural environment, from what it was like, the climate was like during our Civil War in Kentucky, to recycling plastics in Kentucky. There's all different types of activities that you can do with the story maps. So getting access to the Kentucky Geographic Alliance is the first step that you would like to or want to do, and that's looking at the website.
How can any school in Kentucky get started using these tools, these problem-solving tools that you just mentioned that GIS offers?
Well, the neat part about that is when it comes to the problem-solving tools, well, you're already problem solvers. You're already doing these types of things. The geographic information tools that you can get on the website, at access to the website, just help you in regards to things that you are already doing in your individual classrooms. For instance, looking at, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong web link there, but you're already looking at different types of activities within the story map, and then you can come here and sign up as a teacher. You can sign up and get specific software that can help you tell stories and work with the curriculum that you already have in your school, along with lesson plans and other tools. Just follow the links that we have right here, and it'll begin a wonderful activity where you can support your classroom lessons that you already have put together.
You mentioned these tools, this skill set. Can you give an example of a community-based GS project where students had to collaborate with each other?
Sure.
And,
well, one of those examples happens to be down in Simpson County, Kentucky. Franklin is the area, and there's an elementary school here. I'm zooming into this elementary school, and the kids were really, really upset. And the reason they were upset is they have this wonderful playground back here that they're not able to use. A lot of times it's just a big swampy mess. And they were asking themselves, why can't we go out there and play around in not in the swamp, but in our playground more often? And the reason is because the water slowly has been moving from the high area, which is up here, through the elementary school into the ball field, and then there is this a small little man-made lake. Now, before then, you can also see that there's a stream that goes out right here and continues to move on a little bit later. And they modified this environment a little bit to build the school, and it's sitting in the bottom of a bowl, so to speak. Now, they're elementary school kids. All they want to do is they just want to go out and play outside during recess. So before too much longer, they started asking questions, good solid geographic questions on why does this work this way, and what have we tried to do to fix it? And once again, these are elementary school kids, but they get it. And I'm going to zoom all the way into this area and open up the road. And the first step that they did is they dug a trench right along this road. You can see that the road is higher, and they dug a trench to try to redirect the water around the school. But when it rained, and it rained hard, the trench would fill up with water, and naturally you can see this hill right here, and you can see it went up this hill and all of this housing area. All of the water would flow to this area and would create a big swampy area right here. And since these trees have died because of all the water, and it moves around the back of the elementary school and actually ponds up in the parking lot right here. So during the wintertime, if it's ponded water, all the teachers get out of their cars and they're like in an ice rink. And it's really a safety concern. So even at the elementary school, what they wanted to do is they wanted to start measuring how high is the school above this water. So they put together GPS units and went out and measured it, and then modeled their entire playground and their entire school parcel area, all of the land that was associated with the school, to figure out where they could get the water to move naturally instead of straight into where their playground is. So that was at the elementary school. And what I want to do is I want to bring this back into the PowerPoint that I had, because what they did within this question is they asked this specific question about Simpson Elementary School. And we looked and measured all these different areas around the place, but it really came into the scientific method, or what we would call geo-inquiry. And that is, ask a really good question. Why is the water ponding up in our area is basically what they were asking. They went out and collected the data. They went out with GPS units and they learned about technology. And some of them had phones that they could use location at and hide above sea level. They collected the data and then they mapped it out. Then they created a presentation and turned around and presented it to the school board, or they're in the process of presenting it to the school board to talk about different things that they can do to make their playground dry throughout most of the year. So this is the geo-inquiry method, or the scientific method, using geographic information systems to act on a specific activity. Now, they're elementary school kids and they got it. We understand it. And this is the link to the K-12. Middle school kids would probably be a little bit more scientific about it. High school kids are now starting to sort out, what would I like to do when I graduate? What do I need to do to go to college? Or if I want to go into construction, there's all different types of jobs you can use GIS with.
So how does all this fit into STEM projects? And you know, this students come in with some skills. Obviously, you're listing there a list of skills that they had to either know or learn. So how does this fit into the STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics project? Is there a way to understand how this fits into the puzzle of instruction that the students have?
Well, yes, there is. Because first of all, we're advocating understanding, and engineers can come in to the school and show them how to change the way the water is moving. And then we can redirect that water in a different way, which is really physics. And you can calculate the amount of water and how much rain would take place, which is math. And then at the very end, the engineer would propose how to fix this, and a construction company would come in and fix it. So that would cost money, and it all works together in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, to solve a problem like this.
Is there in a school that does not have geography instruction, can this happen? Or is geography
because geography is kind of integrated in all the different disciplines, if you think about it. We're approaching this, I mentioned, even though it's geographic information systems, engineers use geographic information systems to talk about the land, both culturally and physically, to be able to redirect this stuff. So your social studies teacher would be interested in the economics, history, geography, but your science teacher would also be interested in the environment and measuring water flow. So geography integrates into all the different disciplines. Even if you want to think about this, the students could sit down and write a song about how awful it is not to be able to play in their playground when it's all swampy. It sounds like a blues song to me. Don't make me riff a blues line.
So you mentioned that the students share their information that they came up with geographic information systems with the rest of the students and the school. It says there, visualize the data. Did they learn how to do that, or did they use just tools that they had before? Or
well, that's a very good question, because what they did is they reached out to tools that they already had at their school, with their elementary school librarian, and he had some GPS units, and he taught them how to use GPS units. But from there, they sat down and made a model of their area with paper and pencil and scissors, and they cut it all out. And that's stuff that they've been doing for a long period of time, but they modeled how the water would flow through the area. So it's using new technology and technology that they're already trained to use. Scissors, paper, tape, all that kind of stuff to make the model.
On the Simpson, same project, same school project, did they collect their own data, or did they use some other people's data? What is
Well,
hard?
I think that's a great question, because what they did is they collected some of their own data, and they pulled it in from maps that were already there. So that was some of the data that was already available to them that the librarian had. But they also used the technology, GPS units, to be able to collect additional data for latitude, longitude, and height above sea level. But the data, once again, is the basic data that we already have. And once again, scientists, we all collect data. It doesn't matter what type of job that you're going to have in the future. You're going to be collecting data. Even when it comes to that manager at a grocery store, they collect data all the time. So what the engineers do is they come into the schools and show the students how to collect that data. They go out into the school, they use the GPS units, and they explain it to them from their perspective of why this is important. So we pulled in the GPS units, and then we started collecting our own data. And that's stuff that we already do in the classroom, collecting our own individual data to be able to make good decisions about our environment.
I see that they are using different devices. Do you need a supercomputer or a computer lab to do any of?
No, not at all. In fact, you can use your phone. Most schools have computers these days, and even if you don't have a computer, all you need is a piece of paper, pencil, clipboard. You don't even need a clipboard. You just draw out your area and try to measure what's taking place. So the technology's already there. It really takes your thought process, thinking about it, how to integrate it into what skills and what tools you already have. And if there's a new tool that you don't have, ask your librarian or teacher, and they might be able to find an expert in the area to bring in a new tool to help you make a decision for making your life better, or your friends' lives better, your community.
So if a school decides, or a classroom or a class, a teacher decides to get started on this path, what is the first step? What's the advice you give them to get started? The very first step to continue with other steps.
My best advice is to look into your lesson plans in the classroom and think about how you can link your lesson plans out into your environment. Look at the Kentucky Geographic Alliance. The website has all kinds of really good resources, lesson plans and tools, also links to a number of story maps. And once again, a story map is a wonderful tool that takes a map and tells a story with it. And this is what all of us can do. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of story maps here. Once again, I told you about Kentucky's climate during the Civil War. Well, that's a good history lesson that's also bringing in science at the same time. So recycling plastics in Kentucky, that's economics. Okay, so there's all different types of things that we can do. Frontier trails in Kentucky. You know, I'm from Moorhead, and I did not know that that there is a Shawnee Warriors path that goes up through Moorhead that follows 6880, which happens to be a road now, but it was an old buffalo trace a long time ago that the Amerindians followed for trade. There's all kinds of really cool activities out there that bring in maps that can help you with GIS integrate into the lessons that you already have in your classroom. It's not that hard. It's just using the computer to find some resources that integrate into the lessons you already have.
Just to reduce the fear factor, the apprehension factor that people may have. Are they already users of GS without knowing it?
They are. And I think you have an excellent point right there, because what we're doing is we're really thinking about our environment. And that's the best thing we can do is think about our environment. And we're already mapping, we're already creating mental maps of our area. We just get to sit down and tell those stories in a different way using geographic information systems.
Any final thoughts?
The world is your oyster. Today, we have more opportunities than we've ever had in the past to be able to discover and tell stories. People want to hear those stories. What made your community unique? Why did they choose your specific community? Well, once again, in Moorhead, where I'm from, it was where the rivers came together and were right at the break point in the knobs in transition between the eastern Kentucky coal fields and the bluegrass region. It was the rivers that came together at that place that made Moorhead so unique, and that's why Moorhead developed the way it did. Why did your community develop the way it did? And you can tell a story with maps with that.
Thank you so very much, and we hope that they will contact you with questions.
Of course, once again, go through the Kentucky Geographic Alliance website, and we will help you out. We have all kinds of great resources for you. And once again, it is my pleasure, Demetrio. I appreciate all the help and the advocacy that you have, and you're a wonderful resource for the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Okay, everybody, that was Scott Dobler and Demetrio. That was a little more high level of a conversation. So you see the outreach to the education groups there was, really the big point, because that's an important component of our work, because that's where the young people are in the educations. But as you noticed, they're still always trying to find useful problems to solve. So it's more than just showing up at the school, hey, we got cool stuff to do, but he showed up and, helped them solve a problem. And we have a lot of good examples about that. Somebody earlier shared, bad buzz. Somebody earlier shared about the student technology leadership program. And every year we work with students from different high schools to, work on problems that they then purchase into this nice scientific format project, and then we go deliver it at a competitive program that happens in the winter. Scholarship money is at play, cash awards, those kinds of things. So if, as we get to work on a project, we would, that's what we would push you to do, because that's how you get famous for doing the work. So he has one more interview that he recorded with Mr. Charlie Fitzpatrick. It's about 30 minutes long, and it's going to run us overtime for the program. I'm going to go ahead and play it. For those of you who have to get off, that's okay. We're going to put these on the SAP playlist so that you can follow up when you do get time, and you can watch that. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. I'm looking at the chat if you want to drop anything in there real quick. I don't really have control over the Zoom once the video is going. I can't really see what's happening. I think somebody changed the settings earlier, but that's okay, considering where we're at today. All right, so if no questions, thank you very much. I'm gonna play this video and then I'll see you right on the other side of it.
So next we asked Charlie Fitzpatrick to tell us a little bit about how Esri makes an effort to foster GS education and what those efforts are and how the schools in Kentucky can connect with them. Further on down the interview, he gave examples of problem-solving projects that schools and students and teachers can get started with, and how it is a process of starting small and then going a little bigger, and how the sharing of these results from GS projects can really make a difference in terms of how we look at the world and try to solve some of the problems. So here's Charlie. I hope you enjoy the interview.
Esri believes very strongly in education. It's a core ethic of the company, top to bottom. Everybody believes in it. And so for K-12 instruction, we want schools and clubs to be able to have access to it for free. We just want everybody to get so accustomed to thinking this way that that's how they will go through life. So we make it available for free across the world to any K-12 school for instructional use. And so in the US and in Kentucky in particular, you can go to esri.com/schools, and there's a little pull down, and you can go to the software bundle page. And it's a simple process of entering, having an employee of the school or district enter their information, and we provide the software. The key is not just having software. The key is knowing about what to do with it. And we provide all kinds of guidance for people. Some people like to say, okay, I'll get the software and then I'll figure out what to do. A better way to do this, a smarter way to do this, is to think about, okay, I want to learn a little bit about GIS and how do I engage with it, and then say, okay, I want to be able to do more with it. That's generally a more successful way to engage with it. How can schools in Kentucky take advantage of this? It's very easy. Any school can get started by working with some content that we call GeoInquiries, esri.com/GeoInquiries. And these are tools or instructional materials that require no previous experience with GIS. You can get started teaching some content just looking at the activities. There are 150, 180 plus activities in there right now, and they are broken up into content areas, 10 different content areas, 15 or more lessons per content area. And there is a 2-page PDF, a back and forth PDF, a back and front PDF, and a map that goes with it. Each one has its own unique map. And so anybody can get started exploring with it that way. Once you get engaged with it, then there's more that can be done with it. But generally speaking, I think of GeoInquiries as sort of like bumper cars and riding around in a car for a while. It's just like, wow, you get to know how these things work. I can feel what it's like to back up. I can feel what it's like to run into something that I didn't want to run into. Okay, I want to reset. Bang, zoom, you can reset. Or I want to drive around with somebody and I learn the rules of the road. Same thing with GIS. I want to see maps that are pre-created. I want to go in and explore, turn layers on and off, zoom in, zoom out, engage, ask some questions, and interact with the map. Those experiences are fundamental to getting people to recognize that a map is not shouldn't be a static thing that you just look at. The magic of GIS is that I get to interact with the map. I can poke at something and say, what else have you got in there? How do I find the patterns in the relationships? I want to change the scale and zoom back out. And all of those patterns and relationships are so much more understandable when you interact with them. It just takes getting started. One of the cool things about GIS is you can explore anything from a GIS framework. GIS, well, geography covers the world and all that is in it, or was, or could be, which is a lot. And so if you think about what can I do with these tools, it's getting in and exploring, opening up something that somebody has created. So typically what happens is that after people have worked with a few things on their own, they want to see some really good examples. They want to see some story maps. They want to see some dashboards. They want to start looking at data and thinking, wow, I could start creating some of these myself. Now, the good news is this is all doable by students, and you can see examples that students have done in our high school and middle school competition. esriurl.com/AGO school comp. And there you get to see 5 years of student creations where they're saying, I want to do some research about something inside my state, and I may have to create or assemble some data, or I can use data that other people have created, but they've got a question in their head. And that's one of the key pieces about the technology is it's not an encyclopedia. It's not, here's all this stuff, and somebody just does a report. It's really a set of, I've got capacity to answer questions, but you, the user, have to ask questions. And getting people into that interrogating mindset, I want to see what is the pattern, what are the relationships between these different layers of information about some area. And this happens about things that are social things. It happens about things that are natural science, physical science, earth science things, and or the interaction thereof. So people can explore trash in the neighborhood. What are the patterns of trash? What kinds of trash do we find in which kinds of places? What's the distance between these trash things and the nearest trash bin? And or trees. Where do we find particular kinds of trees that are healthy? And where do we find trees that are stressed? And what kinds of trees are they? And what's the nature of the water that they have access to? And all kinds of questions like that. You can start exploring. And this is what people do. They track turtles. They look at things and say, we want to understand these birds floating through here during migrations. We want to see the nature of this invasive species, or we want to find out about how particular housing patterns got established in our community. There are so many questions that you can engage, and it's just looking around in your neighborhood, in your community, and saying, what's it like? What's where? Why is it that way? And then, so what? What's the impact of the patterns and the relationships that I see? All those questions, GIS can help you discover some answers to, and then help you make some decisions about, well, how do we make things better? What can we do to improve it? That's what GIS is for, is to help people solve problems by giving you deeper understanding of the patterns and the relationships between these different sets of data. what they mean, why they work the way they do, and then how do you say, okay, because of all of that, how do we make things better? Okay, what do people need to know? Wow, the most important thing that people need to know is that they can explore and that things happen for a reason. That they can then, if you think about GIS as the science of where, people really need to understand science. Things happen for a reason. Let's discover what the reasons are. Let's see, gee, we've got traffic jams here. Why do we have traffic jams here? Things happen for a reason. There's too much blockage of the flow. What will improve the flow? Maybe do we have too many cars going through here? Maybe do we have too many things in the way, not enough lanes, whatever it might be. What are the impacts of that? How do you begin to study some of this? A lot of people say, ooh, I've got the most exciting project that I want to do. And they describe an amazingly exhaustive and deeply analytical project. And I say, you know, that's a really deep project that you have. Have you done any projects before like this? No, but that's one that I really want to explore. Well, that's not necessarily the best way to do this. What I like to encourage people to do is to begin thinking and building skills, building expertise, building the background in asking questions, finding patterns, working with these tools. In the same way you think about this and say, okay, I want to go for a hike. I hear Everest is a good place. Let's go climb Mount Everest. That's not the way people do things. You don't want to pick up an Everestian challenge as your very first thing. Do a little project. Let's say, even if I said, okay, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to design and conduct a project and evaluate how you've done. And I think, how can that be possible? All right, here's your project. Take a look up at the ceiling in your space where you are right now. Look up at the ceiling and sketch it on your hand. Sketch the ceiling on your hand. Ready, go. And okay, within 10 seconds, okay, stop. Now, how good a job did you do? Did you make a nice comparable drawing of it? Think about a project as a set of tasks that are related to a mission. You need to have a goal, a thing that you want to accomplish. And this is what a lot of people do is they'll say, well, okay, I just want to learn about this thing, whatever it is, and I want to write a report about it. Well, there's a difference between writing a report, which is just a sort of a summary of a bunch of information that you may have accumulated. How do you know that you're done? Well, I got to the end. Okay, well, that's not really a great project. It's a summary of information. The real project has a question, a thing to answer, a thing to achieve, something to accomplish, a goal to meet. Climbing Mount Everest, doing a walk around the block that you live on. There's a mission. There's a thing where you'll know that you're done. And getting people engaged in working with that, they can do that mentally first. And then you say, okay, now I really want to do this on the map. How do I do this with a map? What kind of devices do I need? Well, you could do it with GIS. You can do it on a Chromebook. You can do it on a computer. You don't need a great big monster gaming machine. There's a lot of work that you can do on a phone. I use my phone to do some data entry out in the field. I use a little tablet to do some exploration when I need to go to a meeting and I don't want to carry my laptop with me and I just want to do some work. You can do lots of things on a little modest little tablet, on a Chromebook, on a computer. The most important thing is being able to access data, being able to explore the data, and being able to modify the data if you want to show somebody something. And you can do that with lots of different tools. Windows, Mac, Chromebook, iPhone. We talked about data. Where do I find data? And where is there some place where all of the data is located that anybody might want? Well, no, there's no one gathering place of all the data that there is, that ever could be, that ever was, every piece of data that you might want for your project. There's a lot of professionally generated data that is very good. There's a lot of data that people have just slapdashed, thrown together, and shared publicly that is not good. So if you're doing a project, which of these do you want for your project? You want the good stuff. You want to understand what makes good data. And one of the ways to understand what makes really good data is to put together some data for your own little project and assemble something, and then you discover, wow, if I'm going to make columns and rows, a row for each element of data, a set of columns for each of the pieces of information about that thing, I kind of need to make sure that my data are, I've got everything of a type in one column, and all things about a particular feature in one row. I've got a set of information about that. You can assemble a little table like that about your family pretty easily. Now think about that, instead of being people, think about that being geographic features, trees that you see out in the community, and think about the characteristics of them. You need to have these understandable by the computer. You need to be thinking about the data. And so after you've tried building one of these, you really understand that, wow, I can't just put stuff anywhere. I've got to have particular places where it goes. It needs to be in a format that the computer can understand and process effectively. Gee, if I'm going to do a project about the population and the characteristics of the population in the community, I hope somebody has done a good job in arranging that. Where can I go? Esri has collected a lot of really good information and put it in a space, a framework called the Living Atlas, livingatlas.arcgis.com. You'll find all kinds of carefully constructed, curated data there. Professional organizations put it together. Federal government agencies, your state and local government agencies, and nonprofit groups will be careful about how they design it. And you can tell it when you go in and take a look at how it's documented. Oh, documenting. So if I'm creating data and I want somebody else to be able to use it, I should be documenting the data, making sure that they know how it was gathered and what it's good for and when it was gathered. And those kinds of pieces of information will help people decide, yeah, this doesn't fit what I want, or this is exactly what I'm looking for. There are good data sources and there are less good data sources. But the key is, what do you need for your project? Sometimes you'll find everything that you need produced by professional GIS folks. Sometimes you're going to have to generate data. If you're looking at, I want to know what the people in our school district think about where a new school should go, that's something that nobody else may have gathered the data about, and you may be responsible for gathering that data. So you need to think about, how do I assemble this data? What are the questions that I ask people in a way that doesn't steer their responses, so that I'm getting true, honest answers from these individuals. So there's a whole science to asking questions about people. So if you're just thinking about trees in the neighborhood, that's a little bit easier. You can see how tall the tree is, you can measure it, you can quantify it and qualify it. There are lots of ways that you can go about doing that. So data is the fuel for a GIS project. So good fuel makes for a good project. Bad fuel, just like in a car, doesn't do good service for it. So make sure you're working with good fuel. Who are the best people to use GIS? It's anybody. Across the United States, the people who use GIS most often in schools are typically science teachers. Social studies teachers will use it a lot. Now we're seeing a big rise in the number of people who are CTE teachers, career technical education folks that are saying, wow, all of these people are using GIS. But we also have English teachers who are using GIS. And think, how can an English teacher do that? Hey, we're looking at this story, we're following through. We want to see what these places are that are being named here. We want to track something about it. We want to understand what somebody is going through, and we can track this on the map, see where these experiences are, or where this person came from, what kinds of influences they might have had in their life. There are all kinds of ways of thinking about doing this. There are math teachers that use GIS particularly to understand and analyze the thinking about this like data science. They're trying to understand sets of information about population, and they want to see, because hey, here's a problem that we can understand. We can see what it's like. We can see the people in our community. We can explore these things, the patterns and the relationships between these characteristics. There's a lot of GIS people who are coming at this from fields like political science or economics or history, or, yep, there are geography people. There are also earth science people and physics people and biology people and English teachers. Everybody can use this. We have people that are doing this in elementary school. A few years back, we had people from an elementary school up on stage at the Esri User Conference sharing the projects that they had done. One of them was looking at where could an organization, a big box organization, do an effort across the country. Which are the stores that would make sense for this particular kind of effort? These are third graders that came up with that one. A group of fourth graders wanted to track a balloon across several states. It got caught up in the jet stream and traveled a couple of states away. And they got data from that balloon. That's a really good project. Elementary schools can do that. We got people looking at all kinds of things. Everybody can use this. One of the questions that I get is, great, how do I start? And I think the best way for people to get started in learning to drive is to ride around in a car and to get into bumper cars and experience wheels, go, stop, things like that. Same with mapping. Look at a lot of maps. Look at a lot of pre-constructed GIS content. Work through story maps. Understand how the map and the story that goes along with it make a more effective unit together than either one of them, than the sum of the parts, essentially. They're better together. a map, a static map is very powerful, but an interactive map is much more powerful. It has much more that you can learn from it. Get used to playing with maps and discover that as you're doing this, you start asking questions in your head. You need to train your head to be thinking about those patterns and the relationships. Ask the question, where, why, so what? And as you go through working with these maps, then you'll start itching to be able to say, I want to make something. I want to combine the things that I see in this map and the things I see in that map. I want to mush them together. And that's what you can do with GIS. Get started working with maps, and you just can't stop.
I will second the notion that once you get started in mapping and that kind of thing, it's, you know, it's what I stuck with, and not most problems that I look at, you know, that's kind of the approach. So I can't find to turn my screen back on. All right, well, I appreciate everybody sticking through to the end. What is the website again? I see Mr. Coles asked. They were talking about the KGA site, if it were resources for local educators that are trying to get this kind of thing going. And then Fitzpatrick, Esri has an education kind of clearinghouse, and I will double check that and get that web address for you. So the last two presenters, as I mentioned, is a higher level conversation, and really it was geared toward the educators and the coordinators that are working with the students. But the whole point of having them on and bringing them on was they're in the business of working with folks that are like in Mr. Cole's position, whether it's working on kind of community service oriented projects where we're just trying to do something nice for the rest of the world, or like in our case, they work with our university in terms of getting us connected with software and making sure that we have all the resources that we need for doing undergraduate courses and graduate courses. They have lots of conferences and competitions that provide avenues to get involved and win prizes for being competitive in the approach to problem solving. And to the public, it all looks like mapping, right? It's just mapping. That's how you share. That's how you show. So any final any closing thoughts about geospatial? I know that was a lot to take in today. Well, I promise it won't be the last that you'll hear about GIS before you get out of here. Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Coles.
We was just sitting here thinking and kind of brainstorming, and how, I mean, and again, we are novice, and we are acknowledging our noviceness. But we were just wondering, what about if we would it be sensible and beneficial to the community to map, or well, number one, to define good foods in terms of restaurant or eateries, and then map the restaurants in, let's say, a certain region of the city that has good foods, in an effort to produce good foods for the city.
The whole idea, as you were describing, I was thinking about the Bourbon Trail. And years before Bourbon Trail happened, I used to see posters that would try to tell a story about bourbon production in Kentucky. And what started off first as just mapping the locations right? For somebody who wants to go visit them all. Fast forward a couple of years, and then that became kind of an official thing. Two of our presenters have previously already mentioned what's known as food deserts. So these are places in the city or out in the rural area where you can live, where you either don't have access to fresh groceries or you don't have access to a good distribution of providers, right? So like if you live, I don't know, somewhere like Second Avenue, close to downtown Louisville, one of your few options to get food is McDonald's, right? So in terms of fresh and nutritious food, if that's your only access to cheap and affordable food, that you're in a bad way in terms of health. So as Mr. Coles was just now describing, it would be a fantastic idea to begin to map out what the choice eateries are. So in the past, we've looked at mapping out, for example, where only the organic producers are. So, you know, for a long time, everybody was just going organic crazy, and there were ideas for developing, you know, apps where you could search for a particular product, and then the map, you know, would return the information to say, here's all the vendors who sell that particular kind of thing. And you could think about how you could think about grocery delivery that's happening right now. Instead of getting on DoorDash, which just provides an interface to menus for all the different places, you could compile this information, and your map or your what looks like a website, if you're using Story Map, is essentially that. So right there, you could interface with customers. If you knew the vendors and you knew the products that were available and were able to kind of keep count on those in some way, right? Some collaborative manner, then, you know, right there, there's an entrepreneurial window, you know, just right there. So in just 2 minutes, what began as what could possibly be a map to get interested, we're already up to e-commerce, right? And we build a site, you know, it only costs us $20 to get e-commerce capability in there, but we can take credit cards right on the site, no problem. So as all the presenters have kept saying today, it's, you know, the technology is really the easy part. The hard part is the good ideas. So they showed you the story maps. And I often look at story maps that are built by novices and students, and they are just like one step away from making one of the coolest products that I've seen. And I see that all the time. So, you know, with y'all's tutelage and understanding and wisdom about the world, and now if you have students that are eager and they're just trying to make a mark in some way, that would be a very excellent place to start. So how could we actually do that? It could be very easy. We could sit down tomorrow, jump online, have the students give up where their favorite place is to get such and such food items, right? So by the end of the day, we could have a huge pile of addresses. We could get some pictures and something to go along with it, and then we could build a story map right there. You know, it would show, you know, it would be something specific to our group, you know, where our folks like to eat or something, right? But then what further could that be? We would learn in the process where this and that is at, right?
Right.
And then you turn it to the public and advertise it. This is a service. We'll find what you want. I want organic honey. Boom, here are the places that got organic honey, right? I'll make the call for you for a couple bucks. Credit card, right? So I keep talking about saving the world, but I also keep trying to tug in this whole entrepreneurial thing, because you'll find that even the companies today with the highest ambitions for the rest of the world, they are all driven by profit. Okay.
Right.
So do good while doing well, as they say, right?
Right.
There's plenty of room for that.
Let me ask you that. So let's put a pin in that. Do you think we can get together tomorrow to kind of have that discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. We could talk about that and make it a final project to kind of go along, just so we can quickly get a proof of concept. And then
Okay.
once everybody can see that it's there and it exists and we built it easily with not much rigmarole to go, then You know, from there, the ideas just keep getting better. And then once we're at a point where we have some stuff, then we go back to these experts that we've been talking to and say, hey, here's where we're at. This is what our vision was. And then they'll have really good critiques. Oh, why don't you do this? Look at what these folks did. You know, it just kind of goes from there. So the short answer is yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, okay. We'll talk then, because I got some other things, but okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. We're pretty much out of time. So anybody else that's on here, if you have any business, you need to, you can call me up or shoot me an email. The computer science folks, one of which I see is definitely still on here. I owe you the next item. So I think right when we start the show tomorrow, we'll have the story to tell. We'll let everybody know what y'all's plan is. And if anybody else wants to kind of do something similar, we'll do that. So great. Thank you again for being here. And 10 o'clock tomorrow will be the last day. It'll be the last class day. So looking forward to that. All right. So have a great night. Thank you very much.